Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside the Americas. I'm Laura Cellier. Coming up in the programme, the world's most wanted drug baron is finally behind bars. We hear how Joaquin El Chapo Guzman managed to evade police for 13 years. Plus, California's dry spell, we'll see how a drought is having a devastating impact on agriculture there. And as Hollywood's biggest annual event approaches, we meet the producers, actors and directors who all decide who goes home with an Oscar. All of that still to come. But we begin in Venezuela, where the worst unrest in a decade continued this week. Soaring crime and economic hardship triggered protests and calls for President Nicolas Maduro to resign. Both Maduro and opposition leader Enrique Capriles blame the other for the violence that has claimed at least 15 lives. But Capriles is not Maduro's only rival. Leopoldo Lopez has also emerged as a key challenge to the left. Olivia Salazar-Winsmere has this report.
Standing side by side, united in their opposition to the ruling government, Leopoldo Lopez's wife accompanies presidential runner-up Enrique Capriles. The incarcerated Lopez is quickly becoming the new face of Venezuela's radical opposition. His popularity's only grown since he was jailed on February 18th. The Harvard-educated economist comes from a wealthy family and is the former mayor of the upmarket Chacaco district in Caracas. He founded a centrist party named The Will of the People, and Lopez has one rallying cry: La salida, or the exit of his political foe, Nicolas Maduro.
Our promise is to overthrow the government, using democratic, popular and constitutional channels, of course. But we want to overthrow them. That's our goal, and we're happy to say that openly.
He's urged his supporters to get out in the streets and push Maduro's camp out of power. But Lopez's strategy is too aggressive for some other members of the opposition. The beleaguered centrist is currently being held in a military prison outside of Caracas. He was charged with arson and inciting violence through mass protests across Venezuela.
As a woman, as a wife, and as a mother, I'm convinced we're living under a dictatorship. Leopoldo is unjustly imprisoned. None of the charges he's accused of are real.
Ironically, the upper-middle-class Lopez is among the last surviving ancestors of Simón Bolívar, the independence hero who's something of a symbol for Venezuelan socialism, especially that of late leader Hugo Chavez and his successor, Nicolas Maduro.
Mexico arrested the world's most wanted drug lord this week. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman ran the feared Sinaloa cartel, and he was on the run from police for 13 years. Well, he was finally picked up in the Pacific coast city of Mazatlan. The question now is whether he'll remain in his native Mexico or whether he'll be extradited to face charges in the United States.
Finally, in handcuffs. 13 years after escaping from jail, drug lord Joaquin Guzman Loera was taken into custody, sparking an immediate debate about where to try him. Known as El Chapo, or Shorty, Guzman faces a host of drug-related charges in his native Mexico. But he could also face trafficking and murder charges in the U.S., where he's believed to have smuggled billions of dollars worth of cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine. Some argue that the U.S. justice system is better equipped to secure Guzman and extract the information needed to dismantle his Sinaloa cartel.
The problem with the Mexican judicial system is that they have no way to reach the bottom of the criminal network surrounding Chapo Guzman. And the Sinaloa network will keep growing with the Chapo Guzman or without the Chapo Guzman. That's the unfortunate case, unless you extradite Guzman Loera to the U.S. or to a European country.
But Mexican authorities want the chance to prove themselves on the high-profile case, with many suggesting extradition would be a sign of weakness.
It saddens me that we implicitly recognize that our police, our attorney generals, our tribunals, our prisons are insufficient to judge anybody and punish them in our own country.
Once punished in Mexico's justice system, though, many drug lords have continued to operate their business from behind bars, and corruption has long plagued the country's politics.
You have to start from the assumption, as I said before, that all the presidential campaigns have been infiltrated by the Sinaloa criminal network. On the one hand, you have institutional state vacuums within Mexico and other countries, and then you have a lack of international cooperation to dismantle assets.
Analysts agree that international action will be needed to take apart the Sinaloa cartel, currently thought to be active in at least 54 countries around the world.
A severe drought is taking hold in California, which is experiencing its driest year on record. The situation has got so bad, officials have declared an emergency, and already it's having a devastating impact on the state's $45 billion agriculture industry. Kate Moody has more.
Tree after tree is uprooted in California's Central Valley. 1,000 acres of this orchard have already been pulled down, victims of one of the state's worst ever droughts. California's $5 billion almond industry is among those that's been hit by the lack of rain and limited water supplies.
I just knew that it would be tough to find water for these trees this year, and I'm glad I pulled them out now because it's just impossible to find water. Everybody out on the west side will be broke if it continues. There'll be a lot of guys that go broke this year.
Parts of California and other western states are already facing severe water shortages. In Los Angeles, where strict codes are in place to limit waste, officials patrol the streets to make sure residents aren't watering their gardens when they shouldn't. LA is also offering a rebate program for homeowners who replace their lawns with cactus or other more resistant vegetation. The city's received just 1.2 inches, about 3 centimeters of rain since last July. That's less than 10% of the average rainfall for that period.
So we're increasing our investments in our conservation programs. We are working very hard to augment our local supplies to recover the full use of our groundwater basin and add more water to the local basin, also to capture storm water and to boost our recycled water efforts as well. For the coming year, we're going to have to be very careful with our water use.
Touring parched fields earlier this month, President Obama said he would speed up the release of federal funds to help California's struggling farmers and ranchers. Until then, many are digging their own wells to try and pump groundwater. But they fear it may not satisfy their thirsty crops, as experts warn that even a heavy rainstorm may not be enough to undo the damage.
And finally, Oscars season is finally upon us. The 86th Academy Awards will bring the usual glitz and glamour. And in the frame for this year's prize for Best Picture are 12 Years a Slave. Also in the running, space thriller Gravity and the crime caper American Hustle. Well, there are some of the hopefuls. Well, all of those connected to the films depend on the views of some 6,000 filmmakers, producers and actors. All work for the Academy, and they spend the year watching hundreds of films to decide who will eventually go home with that much-coveted golden statuette.
Ziggy Kozlowski is a busy man. Busy watching films, that is.
I try to watch, honestly, a lot, maybe like 100, 150 a year.
Kozlowski is a publicist and one of the nearly 6,000 members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. That means he gets to vote every year to determine who wins a coveted Oscar statuette.
This is what the ballot looks like. And then you just vote for, you pick one winner per category, except for film, where you're supposed to rate them 1 through 9 in order of preference.
Membership to the Academy is by invitation only and forbids voters from talking about their favorites.
They want the awards, when they're announced at the ceremonies, to be a surprise. They want the nominations to be a surprise. I think that if too many people talk out of turn, you know, it's not a surprise.
I like it. At this time every year, Hollywood is chock full of events for the film industry. Events like this one, where nominated screenwriters get to mingle with and charm Academy members.
You get to meet people in the business and talk about your film, so it's not hard work, really.
But lobbying for votes can get tricky. A contender for Best Original Song had its nomination revoked this year after the composer contacted voters. He claimed his email was well-intentioned, but Academy member John Bailey says it was unethical.
It was considered inappropriate, and the Board of Governors voted to remove that song from consideration.
A rare decision for the Academy, which prides itself on upholding the highest standards throughout its 86 years and more than 2,800 awards.
Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.